Hi everybody. Today I want to talk about the primary and secondary matrices. 101.
Hello Matrix Game of Life subscribers, and welcome to this YouTube channel. If you find that you have benefited from the videos offered, please say thank you with a gift to help keep this channel up and running. A PayPal link will be found in the description box section of Matrix Game videos. May you prosper and be in good health.
Okay, in our last video we covered what source and source fractals are, in a manner just to build a foundation. Before I started this project, which is going to, well, it'll be ongoing. There's really no end to it because the knowledge that can be accessed is infinite. It's infinite source knowledge. And as source, you have a connection to yourself, so to speak. We'll call this a source self connection. That's how I'll be referring to it, rather than, source self fractal, or we'll just say source self. Know that means your fractal. Now about fractals, I should have added this. In source, outside of all the matrices, you are how I would describe a cell is, you are free energy, pure creative source energy, where you have none of the attributes that you find in any of the matrices, though you do have an energy signature, which differentiates you from other cells and functions, cell functions. So you do have your own source self energy signature, which you've always had without beginning and without end. So, now that you know that you are source, you are a self of source, a source self, and now that I would hope that you understand that you are a source player, if indeed you are a source player, only you will know that. You will know that. If you don't come to that realization by watching these videos, then you probably are not a source player. And my videos are geared towards source players. And the reason for that is that in this matrix game of life, there are many source players who have no idea that they are source players. They are still asleep. They're still enthralled by the senses, emotions, and feelings, all the experience that this secondary matrix has to offer. They're sleeping. I would like to think that that's changing for reasons that I'll explain in later videos, but I'm hoping that there are source players that are on the verge of waking up that just might catch something and they'll go, wow, that's me. That's what I am. I understand. And begin to learn exactly what's going on within the matrices. There are two of them primarily. There is the primary matrix, also known as the original matrix. And there is the secondary matrix, which is the matrix that we are experiencing right now. We are experiencing this matrix game of life in this illusory virtual reality dream state, artificial intelligence fed game that we are playing. As I said, it's a game that we created. We created the artificial intelligence, we created the game, we created the matrix, we created it all. We are very powerful selves of Source. It's powerful. That's the only word you can say for it. Before any of the matrices existed, we were in Source as Source. And we did have our own energy signatures that differentiated each of us. We had none of the attributes that we are commonly experiencing here in this matrix, in the secondary matrix. We were in a state where there's no such thing as duality, no such thing as good and evil, life and death, and birth and death, or however you want to say that. No color, no sounds, no landscape, nothing that you find in the matrices or you find outside of the matrix. Now, I know that seems a little bit weird. It almost sounds boring. But if it were, take my word for it, if it were boring, we would not be playing this game right now, because this is a game that has an element of risk to it. There is a risk involved, and it has to do with your energy and your position relative to the core of Source. You made a wager coming into this matrix game of life. It was a major wager. But I don't want to get ahead of myself. The Source players, the Source cells, whose function it is to be an experiencer, a player, as Source and for Source. We got together, and I'm not going to go into detail about this just yet. I'm just trying to lay basic foundations right now. We got together and we decided we were going to create what's called the primary matrix. Now, the primary matrix is vast beyond belief. I mean, we talk about the universe or universes or the omniverse. Well, this transcends even that. If you want to put it in relative to size, although size is actually irrelevant, because all that exists is Source. And this matrix was created within Source. sources in this matrix as you and me, source selves. Anyhow, we got together, we pooled our energy, and we created a sphere. And that's the sphere that I said is more vast than an omniverse. We made this primary matrix, we made it for entertainment purposes, for purposes of setting up challenges, games. In the primary matrix, I have from a good source that there are approximately 260 to 270 other games besides this secondary matrix game that are up and running. I also learned from this source that if you are a source player playing this particular game here, the matrix game of life in the secondary matrix, you are among the best of the best players. You had to be, just to get into this game, because it's the only game where there is risk involved. You are wagering energy, which is in this game is based on frequency. And I'll get into that in a minute. So we went about creating the primary matrix. We created here we go. We created other beings within the primary matrix, and those beings constructed for us. They themselves constructed out of materials that we created. We are creators. We're creator beings. We're powerful creators. We have all the creative power of source. We can create anything. But we created beings and had them construct for us, out of material that we created, biological machines. I'm not going to get into a lot of detail right now about these machines, but they are biological and they are machines. We injected our energies into these machines and gave them what we call here in the secondary matrix, what we call life. We brought them to animation. And we inhabited them. And we used these biological machines for playing games, for what do you do in eternity? There's no such thing as time in eternity. It's always now. It's always now, right here. There's no such thing as the past or the future. It's always now. When are you listening to this? Right now. Anything that you remember that was said doesn't exist. It's just a memory. Reality is always now. It's always now. That's a very crucial concept to understand. If you think about it, you're always here and now. No matter where you are, it's here. And no matter when you're there, it's now. It's always now. And I'll let that go for right now. I'll let it go at that. So in the primary matrix that we created beings that constructed machines that we inhabited, that we used to do all sorts of things. And a lot further down the road I can get into that, but I'm just trying to lay the basic foundations. Now, inside this primary matrix, we created another sphere within it. And within that sphere, we created a box. And that box is what we refer to as the secondary matrix. It's kind of like embedded within the primary matrix. And it's in this secondary matrix where experience got magnified quite a bit. Quite a bit. In the primary matrix, there is no such thing as time as we know it. It just doesn't exist. It's kind of like always now. There are no feelings and emotions. It's different. All that we know in our experience at this point is this secondary matrix that we created inside the primary matrix, and we created it as a game, like other games that are in the primary matrix. However, this is the most difficult, challenging of all games that we've created. It is the only game that has an element of risk associated with it. And you made a wager. You wagered your own eternal abundance of energy, not all of it, but you threw into the pot. You said, I'm in. And you wagered that you could get into this game, play it, win it, and get out. Because the truth of the matter is that I don't have to tell anybody playing this game there's a lot of good things, but there's a lot of grief also, sorrow, pain, suffering. Those things are built into the game, not to torture us, but to nudge us towards seeking a solution to those types of things. This secondary matrix speaks to us all the time. Sometimes it's right in our face, like the movie The Matrix with Keanu Reeves. That's a very basic and coarse representation of what's actually going on. Now, there's a lot of misrepresentation in there because the Matrix will feed you truths, but it's always mingled with untruths. That's how we designed the game to be. We designed this game to be nearly impossible to win. And this game has lived up to our expectations. In the primary matrix, we created, the best way to explain it is we created a manager, artificial intelligence manager, that handles the details of this game. It's artificial intelligence that is our scientists today with their quantum computers have even scratched the surface of the magnitude of what I'm speaking. You know, our minds outside of this constrained and constricted secondary matrix game, our minds outside of it, even in the primary matrix, are vastly superior. Vastly superior to what we experience here. That's why it's important for a player who understands that they are not this body. They are really not in this environment, that their senses and their emotions and their feelings are computer fed, and that their mind outside of this matrix is so far superior. It's be like comparing an ant to Einstein. But I don't want to get off on a tangent there. So this computer system, and I'm just going to let it go at that, because it's kind of it's what I call the demiurge, D-E-M-I-U-R-G-E, demiurge. It's the facilitator. It runs all of the programming that we wrote. We wrote it. Everybody in the game, and even those who are not players, well, I'm going to limit it to players. I'll get into those who are not players in another video, because there are entities, there are just a lot of different types of energies that can cloak themselves they're really not source players. They visit this matrix, the secondary matrix. They visit for a short while. They're allowed to do that. These are entities that live in different dimensions. We are in the third dimension, the lowest, slowest, hardest, most dense dimension to be in, as far as being a source player, an experiencer. Now there are dimensions a little bit below us if you want to take into consideration the flora and the fauna, the elements, a lot of which we consist of, I mean, theoretically speaking. But there are dimensions, and you hear a lot of talk on the internet, for example, about ascension, and everybody talks about third dimensional beings, which is our experience right now. They say things are changing, and we are changing, that our genetic structure is changing from a carbon-based structure to a crystalline-based structure, and once that is accomplished in an individual, it doesn't happen in mass, it happens one, they say, it happens one individual at a time, there's an ascension into the fifth dimension. There are fifth-dimensional beings. And if you listen to them talk, you know that they're not playing in this game. They're playing a primary matrix game where things are much easier. This game, this secondary matrix that we're playing, it's all based on energy, on frequency, and on choices. Choices, choices, choices. Now I'm going to focus primarily, we're going to zoom in here to this matrix that we are experiencing. What's outside of this matrix, it's good to know, it's nice to know, but it does not help you in this game. It just does not. It's nice information to have, but it doesn't help you in this game. This game is about frequencies, it's about energy, and it's about choices. That's the game. For the sake of measurement, measurement is part of this game. You know, we have inches and centimeters and feet and meters and yards and miles and kilometers and night and day, 24 hours, you know, all of that is what you only find out in this game, this secondary matrix game. Outside of it, you don't find that. If you recall in the last video that I made, I threw out on a table the fact that if you're playing this game, you are not really here. This is all an illusion. These bodies that we think are solid, this desk that we think is solid, the things we smell and taste, hear, everything we see, the emotions that we have, the thoughts that seem to just pop into our mind out of nowhere. Well, there's a reason for all of that. None of it's really real. I said we weren't really here. We were somewhere else. Now, if all this doesn't sound crazy enough to you, let me put this out there. From a good source, I have the information that in the primary matrix, kind of lower, like in the more grosser, the primary matrix resembles the secondary matrix in a lot of ways. Not identically, but there are similarities. That's where we get the saying, as above, so below. I'm sure you've heard that saying used. You probably have heard it. Maybe never gave it much thought. When I spoke about the beings that we created and had them build machines for us, well, those machines, if you're a player in the game right now, and all players are in the game right now. This is the last go around. That's another video altogether. We use those biological machines in the primary matrix. Those biological machines are within a pod. in what's called the physical realm. It's physical in the primary matrix only, like our scientists say, our particle physicists and our nuclear physicists, they understand that nothing is really solid. It's all frequency. Everything is a frequency. And all frequency is conscious. It's consciousness itself. That's what source is. Source is consciousness. That's what I am. That's what everything is. It's consciousness. How do I know that? Because I'm conscious and aware of it. I'm aware that I am conscious. I am aware that I am aware. Source as a whole is aware, is consciousness and aware of it. Everything is consciousness. Everything is consciousness. Even these frequencies, waves that I'm talking about. The longer the wave, the more dense the standing waves appear to be, and we get the illusion of solidity. But anyhow, I'm losing my train of thought here. Getting back to the bodies that we had created for us, the biological machines. I have it from a good source that in the primary matrix and the physical realm, not this, what we call physical realm, but in the physical realm outside of this matrix, in the primary matrix, those bodies right now are encased within pods, sleeping. They are sleeping. To say how long they've been sleeping would only matter in the secondary matrix. We could say, well, they've been asleep for hundreds of thousands of years. Time is not the same in the primary matrix, so it wouldn't be experienced that way. But these, we power, we ourselves, in our eternal, pure creative energy that we are, we power those bodies. We power them. We power this matrix. We power the primary matrix. It's our energy, source player energy, that powers all of this. I'm going to finish this video up because I want to leave at a place that doesn't seem so confusing. This can all sound so very confusing. But once you wake up to the idea that you're playing a game and you start learning, you start hearing the self that you are. You're answering your own questions and you know they're true. Now what's true to Source is idiocy to the world. And what's idiocy with Source to the world is wisdom. That's how we set the game up. It's so deceptive. We power these bodies. Now these bodies, I never even got around to saying it. I have it from a good source that these bodies are on Saturn, our planet, so to speak, the planet Saturn, asleep. We are within the body, our source self fractal are within that body, powering that body, which is hooked up, as I said, to the demiurge. And it's being fed data, which we interpret in our conscious body. We have 5 bodies. One is immovable, that's your source fractal. But there's a conscious body, a subconscious body, an emotional body, and the body that has the DNA, which we power. That's called a soul cage. The soul is not what you might think it is. Outside of the matrices, there is no soul. You are not a soul. It's part of a game piece. It's part of something that's needed to play this game. Anyhow, that body, which you are inhabiting and powering, is hooked up to this demiurge, this artificial intelligence, that feeds data into the mind, which results in a dream. And this is the dream. Before we came into the game, we entered into what's called a soul contract. We chose our character, what stage we wanted to act on. In this case, I'll call it a stage planet Earth. We chose the timeline that we wanted to act on, and you can act on more than one stage and in many different timelines, and it's all happening right now. That's hard. I'm not even going to try to explain that. We'll get to that later. We entered into a contract. We were given a script, which is basically pretty much immutable. It's followed line for line for line until we wake up enough and raise our frequency high enough that we can unlock that script, which unleashes our empowerment and our creative abilities. And then there's plateaus above that, frequency levels. We have these scripts. We've agreed to all of this before we ever came into this game. After we had created it and built it and watched it run, and we're satisfied, we entered into a contract because it was a wager. A wager was being made. We were putting up our energy, our eternal supply of energy. And we have a lot of it, believe me. I mean, don't let that scare you. But there are repercussions to leaving this game, having depleted a good portion of your energy supply, never having raised your frequency. Nothing beneficial comes from that. It's a game. You got to play it to win. You got to play the game to win, and that's all based on the choices that you make. Now, you have a contract for a character, for a stage, for a timeline. What I mean by timeline is, like, you might have wanted to play the game in 1280 BC as an Egyptian. You had that choice. You could be whatever character in whatever timeline, whatever you wanted to be. You could choose to have been from the aristocracy and wealth, but that would always be balanced out with another life. You didn't have that at all. And sometimes choosing or trying to choose coming from wealth and means is a hindrance to winning the game, because people who come from money, you think they're listening to talk like this? If any of them are, I would be extremely surprised myself. I don't know of any people that are in power, politics and power, religious power. I don't know any of them that are source players. I don't. In fact, source players are few and far between. There aren't a whole lot of us in comparison. Like on this planet alone, there are 7 billion people, and source players are outnumbered 5,000 to 1. You do the math. That's another story. This is all a dream. Like I said, it is a scripted dream. You chose the settings and the stage. You chose the family that you were going to be born into. Your mother is always a source player. A source player cannot come from a non-source player mother. You can have a source player mother and a non-source player father, and that's okay, but all source players are born to source player mothers. My mother was a source player. My grandmother was a source player. Whether they knew it or not is besides the point. I know that they were. And that goes back to the beginning of this game. Everything was prearranged, and we agreed to it when we came into the game. When we entered into the game, we had our minds wiped, like I said. Our mind was wiped of memory. We came in clean, like a baby. A newborn infant doesn't have, well, they may have memories. Their consciousness and awareness hasn't developed enough to be aware of them, but they enter into this game, they start becoming conditioned. Mommy and daddy start, say dada, say mama, and the next thing you know, they're in preschool and school, grade school, and then high school, and then college, and then the world, and the conditioning mounts and mounts and mounts. Things constantly seem to be going wrong. Everybody's saying, why? But that's the challenge of the game. It's how we built it. The way to escape this matrix, the way to win the game, is to raise your frequency. And you do that by making good choices to the situations that the matrix itself is programmed to present to you. It does not, you do not have programmed responses after you've unlocked your script. The matrix, at that point, the matrix, it doesn't feed you your responses to the situations you're presented with. We call it free will. We're in a free will zone. I've come to understand that if I want to live the best life that I've ever lived, it's all based on the choices that I make the reactions that I have to the situations that I'm confronted with. I've learned not to battle. I've learned, I can't say in totality, but I've learned neutrality. You know, I can watch Fox News or something, which I don't watch much of, and watch all the politicians going back and forth yelling and screaming at each other, and to me it's comedy. It's comedy. Because it's really not in my reality any longer. You know, when was the last time you were in the middle of a firefight in Iraq? That's not in your reality. There are some source players who that was in their reality. But it's not in my reality at this now moment, so it doesn't mean anything to me. What means something to me is making good choices and trying to win this game for myself, because great is the reward. If you can get out of here with more energy than you came in with. You didn't come in with all your energy. You always have energy. That's another story. I'll talk about how energy works and hand in hand with frequency. But it's all about raising your frequency. You do that by making good choices. The higher your frequency gets, the more you see through the game, you see right through it, the easier it is to make good choices, and your game just keeps getting better. Some would say life is getting better. Yeah, your game gets better because you're learning to create what you want by the choices that you make. It doesn't happen overnight. Raising your frequency it's not as hard as it seems, but at the same time, like any game, there are rules to the game. There are rules. And if you step outside of the rules, you don't benefit. You can step outside of the rules all you want. It doesn't affect anybody except you. To know what the rules of the game are, you know, if you're a professional baseball player or golfer, you've got to know the rules to the game, because if you don't know the rules, you'll never learn how to play the game. And this game has rules. There is one big one, and I'm going to put it out right here in the beginning of my videos. There is one, it sits right at the top of the heap about what will keep your frequency low, keep you in ignorance. If you want to raise your frequency, if you want to climb the frequency ladder, the ladder of knowledge, empowerment, and move toward winning the game, or at least getting out of here with more energy you came in with, which itself is saying something. Do not consume food that at one point had a heartbeat. Meat, chicken, fish, fowl. Anything that at one point had a heartbeat, don't eat it. This has nothing to do with love for animals. It has nothing to do with that at all. It has to do with what happens, what's going on in the primary matrix. Now, I'm gonna leave it at that. I'm sure a lot of people right now are going, well, you know, this has nothing to do with vegetarianism or veganism or any of those movements. It has nothing to do with that at all. Believe me about that. It has nothing to do with any of that. It is beneficially, it's beneficial to your game. And to be quite clear about that, I'm going to have to explain in another video why about the biggest rule of this game is to not eat anything that once had a heartbeat. Nothing. I noticed when I realized that, and I cut that out of my diet. It makes a change. It does. It changes things. And it's all good. It's all beneficial. Do you think I care about cows? Not really. No, I don't. I'm not a animal lover. I'm just not. I never have been. They're all right. Animals are here for a reason. They're in the game for a reason. It's to evoke emotion. Emotions of love and cuddling and happiness, or getting bit and yelling at them and shooing away or stepping in dog crap or something. They evoke emotions, and that is how we power the matrix. The matrix runs on the power of the source players. And the more you feed the matrix power, the stronger it becomes in your reality. I've said an awful lot today, much more than I planned on saying. I'm going to have to learn how to cut these videos down a little bit and try to compartmentalize a little bit more. But I am laying a basic foundation. There's a lot to cover. I mean, there's a lot to cover. And if what I said sounds confusing to you, stick around. It will become clear. If you are a player, if you are not, you're not watching this right now, probably. If you watched the first video, the old one I put up a few years ago, as a point of reference, the video just before this one and this video, if you're still watching, you just might be a source player. You will know. And when you know, you'll know that you know that you know that this is a game and that you're playing it. And everything will start to come clear. All the pieces will start to come together after a while. And you'll be able to see how something that sounds so complicated and so doesn't make a bit of sense to the world of the matrix. If you're still listening, it'll all come together. And from that point on, it only gets better. If you continue to play to win. If you are newly awakened to the fact that you're a source player, it's not real hard to slip back into old habits and ways and back into lower frequencies. But if you want to raise your frequency to the point where you can unlock this script that I'm talking about, that you came in here with, it was your script like an actor on a stage. You had a script. And you went line by that script. When you unlock that script, you can ad-lib all you want. You can create what you want and how you want it. And don't be surprised if have you ever asked yourself what it is that you really want? most of the things that we want, we get them, they're hollow. We end up wanting more of the same, which is not beneficial, or, you know, like, if I told you I wanted to be president of the United States, what's the chances of that happening? Number one, I have no desire to be in politics, so that's not going to happen anyhow, but like, what kind of desire would that be? Stupid. If I have any desire, it's for truth. What is this that is? What is this all about? It's been my primary concern all of my life. And it remains that. But because it was what I was focused on. You get what you focus on. You'll create it. In the Proverbs, I think it's in the Proverbs in the Bible, it says, the thing that you fear the most will come upon you. Why? Because that's what you're focused on. You're creating the very thing that you don't want by giving it power. Change your focus. Get rid of your belief systems. Open up to something brand new that might sound crazy, but it isn't. Once everything starts falling together and you see the big picture, it's pretty simple, actually. What's hard is waking up. If you understand that there's something wrong with this world, if that's how you see it, then there's a reason for that. If it makes you uncomfortable, there's a reason for that. It's something telling you, well, look, maybe it's that way because it is a true lie. It's an illusion. Illusions are real. The content of the illusion is not real, but an illusion is a real thing. Illusion exists. It's part of this game. It's part of how we designed the game. The game is deceptive. It's illusory. It's powerful. It's not your enemy. If you make the matrix game of life your enemy, you do yourself a disservice, because then you're going to start battling it, and what you resist will persist. It's more of a matter of like, hey, let's try something new here. All right, I rambled on enough. I don't even know how. Wow, almost an hour. Almost an hour. Well, it is what it is. I don't come in here scripted. I don't have notes written down what I want to talk about. What comes out is what comes out. And like I said, if I don't know something, I'm not going to say it. I do have a good source self connection. I know what I am, and that only broadens. It never shrinks. It just keeps. Possibilities are infinite. Infinite. So peace be with you, health, wealth, and prosperity. And I'll see you the next time around. And we'll get in. I'll try to get a little bit more compartmentalized, and well, I'm not apologizing. I'm saying it like it is, and I know a lot of it sounds redundant, but it needs redundancy before it sinks in. So, I'll see you next video.